come back from lunch. We have the privilege of having as our next speaker Mr. Carlton Highsmith, one of the few individuals who have actually started a business, grown into a global brand, to share his experiences growing his business with us. It's always a pleasure and an honor for us to have him. He spoke at our last conference, and his presentation was very well received. And I'm looking forward to what he's going to say now. I would like us to give a round of applause to Mr. Carlton Highsmith, the founder and former CEO of SPG. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's after lunch, and I will try my best to keep you from dozing. What I'm going to do today is essentially share with you my journey as an entrepreneur, business owner. I'll share with you what inspired me to start my business. I will share with you what that business looked like in 2009. It was the last year I owned it because I sold it to a large private equity firm in 2009. But the journey began many decades earlier. I grew up as a poor black kid in the rural South, the segregated South. I went to all black schools from the time I was in kindergarten to high school. I graduated from a segregated high school in 1969. And many of you would say, how is that possible since the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, happened in 1954? Well, most school districts in the South didn't obey the Supreme Court order. They remained segregated. Not many people know that. And what had to happen was that a lot of the districts had to be sued before they would comply with the Supreme Court order. So my district in eastern North Carolina was not sued successfully until 1970. So my school district in eastern North Carolina did not desegregate their schools until 1970. Most people find that to be amazing. But I graduated from all black school and had the great fortune of earning a scholarship to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And it was in September of 1969, I was sitting in the class, a political science course with Dr. Matthew Holden. And we were talking about power, influence. How do you impact your community? How do you change your community? And as you can imagine, in 1969, the various sort of spheres of influence that were driving that conversation was Martin Luther King, of course, but you also had H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael. So a lot of us were debating what was the most effective way to really impact your community. How do you change your community? So Dr. Holden let us debate ourselves for 50 minutes about whether Stokely Carmichael was right, H. Rap Brown was right, or whether Martin Luther King was right. And he listened, at the end of it, he said, okay, great perspectives, guys, but let me give you another one. And he pulled out $1, much like this one. And he said, let me pose a question to you. And most of the kids who were in that class looked like me, African Americans. He said, how much wealth do you think our community has? For every dollar of wealth in the United States, how much of it do we hold? And we, threw out numbers. And he finally said, okay, enough guessing, here's what it is. he held up a dime. 10 cents. For every dollar of wealth in the United States, a dime, 10 cents is held by my community. And he says, how can you gain power and influence by holding only a dime? And he said, well, perhaps you want to think about people like Ford, DuPont, Carnegie, Mr. Proctor, Mr. Gamble, Mr. Johnson, those incredible entrepreneurs who started businesses that grew to become these global powerhouses, and look at the thousands of people they employ, the foundations they founded, and their ability to impact change in their community. So he said, perhaps some of you might want to think about being entrepreneurs. That was the most powerful lesson that any professor has ever delivered to me, because I never forgot it. A dime for every dollar held of wealth in this country. And how can you impact change holding just a dime? And so I said from that class day, you know what, I'm going to think about entrepreneurship one day. So even though I went to work for a large global packaging company, when I graduated in '73, I never forgot what Dr. Holden said that day. And so after 9 years of working for this incredible company that gave me lots of opportunities to grow and gain skills, I never lost that passion for wanting to own my own business because of the impact I could have in transforming the life of my family and my community. So that was my inspiration. That was why I decided to become an entrepreneur. Walked into my boss's office in 1983 and said, I quit. And he said, you're what? Because at that point, I was division marketing services manager for a large packaging business. Had 38 employees, lots of responsibilities, but I said, I think now I'm ready to start my own package design engineering business. So he said, you'll be sorry, you'll be back. And perhaps sometimes we need someone like that, a doubting Thomas, to fire us, because even during those hard days of starting the business in the early years, I kept thinking, I'm not going to go back to Ken Funte's office as a failure. I'm simply not going to do that. And so I went into a small basement office a few blocks from here on Elm Street, 27 Elm Street. That basement office is where I started Specialized Packaging as a small little design engineering business, working with pharmaceutical companies, cosmetics companies, designing what their packages ought to look like. So let's pick up the story from 1983 to 2009. I'm going to share with you sort of how we grew to become the company we became, some of our strategies, and then I'm going to leave lots of time for questions, because I think that's probably going to be the most important part of what I do today. In 2009, I had 600 people working for me across the country. We had revenues of $180 million. Now think about it. Basement office, starting a business in 1983, 0 sales, and in 2009, 26 years later, we had revenues of $180 million. We've become the 7th largest manufacturer of paperboard packaging in North America. And Earl Graves used to track black-owned businesses in the country, and we had gotten as high as number 26 on that BE 100 list. This is what we looked like in 1983. One location doing a little under $500,000. This is what we looked like in 2009. We had 5 manufacturing plants across the US and Canada. We had revenues that had grown consistently over a decade. And what was probably the biggest takeaway I want you to, from this slide is, look at the categories that we focused in on, all part of the strategy. Our industry was a $20 billion industry. We were a small company, even at $180 million. So how do you succeed in an industry that's that large with lots of multi-billion-dollar competitors? You have to focus. You have to be specialized. You have to decide, what is it where is it that we can really make a difference? And so we chose our markets very, very carefully. Oral care, we were the #1 producer of toothpaste cartons in North America. No one did more cartons than us. We did all of Crest for Procter & Gamble, all of Colgate for Canada. So no one did more toothpaste cartons than us. Fabric care, Tide and Cheer, we were #1. No one manufactured more laundry detergent cartons than us. We became really good at it. We were really very good at innovations in that space. Pet care, Fresh Step Scoop Away for Clorox. Swiffer for Procter & Gamble, the #1 surface cleaning product. And then Ziploc, my favorite, that S.C. Johnson company in Racine, Wisconsin, is absolute delight to work with and for. We were the largest producer of Ziploc cartons for S.C. Johnson. This is what we looked like in 2009 in terms of our footprint. Our sales offices were in Chicago, in Hamden, Cincinnati, Radisson, New York, outside of Syracuse, London, Ontario, midway between Syracuse and Toronto. Our manufacturing facilities were, as you see, and then we had lots of design engineering centers around the country, located very near where our customers were. That's what our physical plants look like. The one in the middle, Radisson, was our battleship facility. That was a 200,000 square foot plant. Almost half of our sales came out of that plant. Then we had other satellite plants across the country, as you see. That's the oral care I mentioned before with P&G and Crest and Colgate and Aquafresh, a SmithKline French, SmithKline Beecham company. The fabric care I mentioned with Tide and Cheer and Ivory. More home care with SOS for Clorox, Raid for S.C. Johnson, Ziploc, of course, for S.C. Johnson as well. Then personal care with Johnson & Johnson's Clean and Clear, Neutrogena, Irish Spring for Clorox, Boost Nutritional for Bristol-Myers Squibb. Here again, those are the cartons for Clorox for their pet care business. And here again, we focused on markets where we felt we could win, where we had some particular advantage, either in innovation or technology or some process. Now, the strategies. 1984, a year after I started the company, was probably the most important decision we made, and that was to establish a strategic alliance with Allied-Swiss-Lanza Lawson Martin Group out of Canada. Huge manufacturing company, no presence in the US, but wanting access to the US market. We happened to meet some principals, formed an incredible relationship with them, and formed the strategic alliance in 1984 with them, and that alliance led to some really incredible things over the next 2 decades. In 1998, I acquired one of the divisions of Allied-Swiss-Lanza, that Lawson Martin Group. In 2003, I did another acquisition of a very specialty folding carton converter that had plants in Kansas and North Carolina that was really important to us. Another acquisition in 2003 of packaging machinery services. And then we had a lot of technology investments that we made over the years, and I'll talk a little bit about those. That first really important alliance was with Lawson Martin. And I'm asked a lot about strategic alliances. When should you do them and when should you not do them? And I've always maintained when I talk to young entrepreneurs, there's got to be a reason, a rationale, some really compelling reasons that you form strategic alliances. Everyone has to bring something to the table so that the two of you, when you join together, you become better than the two of you separate and apart. I've seen so many alliances where they're put together for the wrong reasons, and the synergies aren't there, and there ends up being a disaster for one or both companies. So I really, really believe that there's got to be some really compelling reasons that you come together and they result in greater value for all of the stakeholders. In 1998, the same thing with acquisitions. You know, I was a package design engineering business from 83 to 97. I had 20 employees in 97. And all of a sudden, I'm going to do an acquisition where I'm going to buy a manufacturing business. It's going to have 200 plus employees. Why would you do that? There's got to be some compelling strategic reasons you do that. And there needs to be some really deep analysis that understands, what each party brings to what each individual brings to the party, and whether or not there are going to be synergies, which you hear me say that word a lot because I really think that that's an important concept, this notion of getting something greater and bigger out of the two that you put together. In 2003, the same thing. We bought Focus Packaging for some really good reasons. We made a decision that flexo printing was going to become the print technology of the future. We sort of foresaw that consumer products companies were adopting this notion of mass customization and expansion of brands, lots of different SKUs. And so that you needed to have print technology that was flexible, that could adapt, could change over quickly, and flexo was that technology. Focus Packaging was a leader in that space. And we wanted to make lots of investments in that space, but we didn't know that space. So Focus Packaging gave us access to technology, know-how, expertise, which was really important for us. We got additional plants, we got additional customers, but we got their expertise, their technology, which was really important for us. That technology that we ultimately invested in as a result of the expertise that Focus Packaging brought to us was BOP's flexo technology. This was the best in the world. These are very expensive pieces of equipment, $6.5 million a copy. And when you're going to make that kind of investment, you want to make sure you get it right. So therefore, the expertise that we got from Focus Packaging, we were able to make really intelligent decisions when it came to investing in flexo. And I can tell you now, I'm not out of the industry now, but I can tell you now, flexo printing is the preferred print technology in the packaging space today. So our guess was right. Here again, this is a hybrid primography, we called it, but essentially it was flexo. We changed it a little bit, but it was that technology that we got from Focus Packaging, that expertise we got from Focus Packaging. And this gave us a differentiation we needed to be able to be the #1 producer of toothpaste cartons in America. Because if you go to pick up a toothpaste package in a grocery store, what do you see? 50 different varieties, all kinds of flavors. So the technology used to produce that has to be fast, flexible. You have to be able to do things in line, and this technology does it. Talking about innovation and technology, S.C. Johnson, my favorite companies that I mentioned to work with, because they allowed us to be really innovative. Recall when they launched these scented bottles, these scented candles, these scented oils. These all came in packages that they wanted the consumer to see them, because consumers were always interested in what would this look like in my home? What would this look like in my bathroom? And so you had to have a package that showed the visibility, but was also very, very strong. And so our technology team came up with the idea of using a rivet PVC window affixed to a paperboard package, but being able to crease that PVC at very high speeds in line on a folded gluer. It had never been done before. So we patented the technology, and we became the #1 producer of cartons like this for raids, scented products, scented candles, scented oils, that sort of thing. Let's talk about some of the other sort of strategies that we tried to employ as we grew our business. Innovation. I cannot talk enough about innovation as a way to differentiate yourself and set you apart from your competition. And remember, we started as a package design engineering business, which meant that we were innovators. And we tried to keep that as a core to everything we did. We wanted to be known as the innovations company. So as a result, those design centers that we had around the country were equipped with the very latest in CAD. CAD was just emerging, computer-aided design was just emerging for our space in the 80s and 90s, and we were all over it. we were all over it. And then something else that was happening in the late 80s was that desktop publishing was coming into existence, right? You remember the old Macs that were running, and all of a sudden, instead of having artists sit around the table and take days to put together a piece of artwork, it now, with the technology that Macintosh and the Quark Express developers and the Illustrator developers and the PageMaker, Photoshop, all those programs were developed in the late 80s, early 90s. And we saw that, wow, we could take this desktop publishing technology and we could reapply it to designing for a folding carton, which essentially is a page that has 4 sides to it, right? So we took this technology, integrated it with our CAD, and all of a sudden we became this really leading edge package design engineering business incorporating new technology. Then Mac built faster machines in 1990, 91, 92 that could run these programs. And this gave us a tremendous advantage when it came to being a leading edge package design engineering business. And we were a small little company. People would look at us and how are they doing it? How can they develop so many prototypes so fast, so quickly? Because we leveraged technology and emerging technology. An example of some of the things that we did, Johnson & Johnson in 1985. This is a skincare line that we designed for them with a lot of inline decorating techniques, embossing, foil stamping. This was one of our really most important developments, I think, because this put us on the map globally, because Johnson & Johnson is a global business. And in 1985, 84, Johnson & Johnson had launched this toothbrush called Reach. And this was really one of the first sort of dental hygienists to develop toothbrush. It had lots of features in it that J&J felt was going to make this the #1 toothbrush in the world. It had bi-level bristles. It had extended handles, a longer bristle head. It had lots of features that was going to make this the #1 toothbrush in the world. And what happened when they launched it, it did not achieve that status. And they were like, what happened? What's wrong? Well, think about the category. When you buy a toothbrush, do you go to the grocery store, do you go to the drugstore with the intent of buying a toothbrush? You don't. It's an impulse buy, right? So that means the package has to do a lot. It has to grab your attention. It has to communicate product features. So we recognized that this had to become a silent salesman on the shelf. And so we got the project and we did a bunch of things to it to make that package a lot more powerful. We embossed the bristles, made them bi-level, so that this product feature called bi-level bristles, you could actually see it at point of purchase. We embossed the handles. We embossed the word reach. We had this word reach, which goes very close to a cut score. We developed an embossing pattern that gave the appearance that that reach was still embossed all the way to the crease, but it wasn't. In other words, we developed a package that took Reach to become the #1 toothbrush by 1989. And that got the attention of Johnson & Johnson. And so now J&J looked up at us as a leading innovator. So we got called into almost every new J&J launch in their consumer products division. Gave us lots of visibility around the world. This, I think, was one of our most sort of engineering-wise, this was one of our best developments. Because not long after Reach, J&J launched what's called a Prevent toothbrush, which was the first tooth and gum brush, which meant that it was designed to provide healthier gums as well as clean your teeth. So we came up with a package, and you see it there, that had a pictorial of a gum on the inside to communicate at point of purchase that it was a tooth and gum brush. We had a partition on the inside that a toothbrush would lie against, and would give the impression that a toothbrush was at a 45-degree angle to the tooth and gum pictorial. And if you listen to your dental hygienist, she'll tell you that the proper brushing angle is 45 degrees. So this toothbrush package was doing a lot in terms of communicating product features. And being able to produce it in mass quantities was really hard to do, So much so that the Canadian Packaging Association recognized us in 1989 and gave us a Technical Merit Award for this package. And J&J launched the product, and it failed. So even though we had a leading-edge, award-winning package, this product was discontinued by 1991. Not a single one on the shelf, and I'll bet you none of you ever heard of it. When the transition from paperboard to plastics happened, and back in the day, all toothbrush used to be in a folding box. Now they're all in plastics. Most of the plastic designs that you see today were designs that we probably made, because we incorporated lots of product features of what the brushes look like, what the bristles look like, into the blister molds. And everyone replicated what we did. This is another J&J innovation. They have a floss that was a flavored floss, a very aggressive. Essential oils were part of the flavor ingredients, and they'd had to have a package that had lots of barrier properties. So we developed this Barex lamination to a metallized film, and we produced billions of these. Lots of these were given away in Seni supplements. Another great innovation for Johnson & Johnson, they had this power brush, and they needed a replacement head box. So once you bought the power brush, you had replacement heads, and this box was designed to sort of house the replacement heads. Also had a 6-panel so that kids had a place to play games on it. We reapplied this technology for a lot of our physician samples later on. The 6th panel, that 7th panel, that's really, really difficult to do, this, because that folds down and that folds down. And that's all done at sometimes, 100,000 an hour in terms of speeds on a gluer. So very difficult to do. But it gives you all this additional space for information for pharmacy samples and kids' toys, that sort of thing. This, commercially, was our most impactful innovation. You don't see them much anymore, but because most folks have gone to liquids. But back in the day, powders was the dominant way that detergent was sold. And what was the #1 dissatisfier for powders? Can anyone tell me?
Smell.
Right? What was that?
The smell?
Well, smell, not necessarily. What do people complain about with powders? They're clumpy. Exactly right. They don't dissolve. So P&G's consumer research showed that, and so P&G said, we're going to reformulate that. We need to make our detergents less clumpy so that they dissolve more instantly when they hit water. And so what that meant is that that made them more hygroscopic, which meant that the package that came in needed to have higher barrier. And so we were charged with coming up with a new package specification to hold that new, more hygroscopic dry powder for Procter & Gamble. Now, mind you, we were given the project. Smurfit Stone, a $2.5 billion company, was given the project. Graphics Packaging, a $4 billion company, was given the project. We came up with a solution months before they did. And as a result, we had to share our technology with them because they were minor suppliers, but we became the dominant supplier for P&G's dry laundry detergent. So much so that in 1999, P&G signed with me a $100 million contract to produce all their dry laundry cartons. This had been the largest contract that P&G had ever signed with a minority-owned company, and it was a result of our innovation. Oh, thank you. So I want to sort of spend the next few minutes talking about core competencies. What are those things that we embrace to drive the growth of our company over the 27 years that I owned it? One of them I think I told you already, and that was one of innovation. We really, really focused on how do we differentiate ourselves from the competition. And one of the great things about innovation, it can come from anywhere. You don't necessarily have to be large in scale to have great ideas. To the extent that you have really creative people, you put them in an environment where there are no bad ideas and ideas get built upon, you will be amazed at the number of solutions you come up with. So we came up with this disciplined, we called it PDI, way of developing new ideas, new concepts. And that became a core principle of which we ran the company for years. Innovation. Total quality management. You imagine you're the sole supplier to Procter & Gamble on Swiffer. So every Swiffer carton that every Swiffer product they're gonna sell is gonna be in a package that you make. And they entrust you with that. And they tell you, these are the dates our national advertising launches. These are the dates we expect your cartons to be delivered to our 16 plants around North America. You better be able to get that right. You really gotta get that right. Not only you have to make the dates when your stuff gets there, it better work every time. And so you gotta be focused on total quality management from the top down. Everyone has to appreciate the importance of getting it right, understanding what the specifications are, what it requires of you, condensing that specification into a work instruction for even the technicians on the floor, so everybody clearly understands this is what is required of you if in fact we are going to meet P&G's expectations. So a focus on total quality management was a core to our company. And if you were to talk to our major customers, they would tell you, SPG, reliable. SPG, we can count on them. Really important that you're able to keep your word. Really important. And the third core to us was, I guess I'm a little bit paranoid in that I don't like losing business. I never like losing an opportunity. We really work hard to develop relationships, develop a contract, develop customers, and I don't like losing them. And how do you avoid losing them? Bring the best quality, bring continuous improvement, bring new ideas, and bring lower cost. So that became a core to our business. Lots of teams throughout our organizations working on those two things. How do we improve quality and how do we lower cost? Because like it or not, there are people out there who are looking at the business you have and they want to take it from you. And how do you keep them from taking it from you? Delighting the customer with better quality, continuous improvement, and lower cost. So if there's one thing you take away from today, understand what your core competencies, your core strengths are, and leverage them. And leverage them to grow your business. And everything else is going to be, okay, how do you take those core competencies and put them into a business model, a way that you can communicate with employees so that everybody understands what you're talking about? Well, we developed an acronym we call SMART, which is Strategic Marketing and Responsive Teamwork, which essentially says, okay, we're going to have a business development team that I ran. As the president and CEO of the company, I still ran the business development team. I had a sales director, but because in our industry, business moves in such large chunks, $5 million increments, $10 million increments, you've got to be really sure that that business is a fit for your company. And so I was always there to make sure our business development team was doing the right thing with respect to understanding what our strengths were, what the requirements were of the business we were trying to win, and to make sure there was a fit. I've seen so many companies choke on new opportunities because it wasn't a right fit for their company. We try to avoid that by having a process, a disciplined process, strategic business development team, to assess whether that's a good fit for our company. I said no to Coca-Cola, I said no to Pepsi. They wanted us to produce their carriers for sodas, and I said no. Not a fit for us. Volumes are way too large for us. It would tie us in knots. We don't have the logistics, we don't have the supply chain capability to do that, so no. I said no to Philip Morris. Philip Morris wanted us to produce cartons for Marlboro. That's a whole nother ball game, they said, in terms of what your requirements, what your expertise has to be. So we said no. Having a disciplined process of understanding what business fits your company and what doesn't. Then product development innovation, we talked about that one, the PDI team. This team right here, I want to go back. This team right here, we call it PIV, which is an acronym for Plan, Implement, and Validate, which essentially is a de-risking process, right? So if ever you get a new business, new contract, new customer, you want to make sure you understand clearly what their expectations are. What that package has to endure from the time it leaves your dock, when it arrives in their dock, their warehouse, goes through their production lines, into their corrugated shippers, into their distribution system, onto the shelf of a store. You better clearly understand what that looks like, because that has implications as to how you make it. And you never, ever change a validated process. Once you qualify a particular customer on a particular kind of board, particular kind of ink, particular printing press, don't change it. You better not change it unless you do another validation process, PIV. People in our company understood there's one thing that got you fired. Change something without going through a PIV. That got you fired. Because even the smallest changes you think can have significant impact on the final product. So having a discipline of that reliability thing I talked about, making sure that it works every time, each and every time, once you validate that, don't change it unless you go through another PIV. And then the world-class manufacturing, linear manufacturing, that's part of the whole continuous process, getting better quality, lower prices. And that's just more verbiage around that. This is a question I'm asked a lot. How do you finance a business of the size that you grew yours to be? In the beginning, it was very, very hard. I started the business in '83. I couldn't get a bank to really talk to me until 1990, 7 years later. And I approached them every year. We don't do startups, they said. You don't have a track record. But that didn't keep me from keeping comprehensive financials each year, close the year, review quality statements. So finally, in 1990, I found a bank, was willing to give me a $500,000 working capital line. But I had to do a lot of things to get it. I had to pledge my receivables, had to issue a personal guarantee, which meant signing over my house in case it didn't work out. So it takes a lot of courage to be an entrepreneur and to put everything on the line. But if you believe in sort of your business model, you do that. In 1998, when I bought that division from ISOE Lanza, we needed $24 million to close that transaction. $24 million is what I paid for that division in 1998. $22.5 million of it came from these facilities. A term, revolver, and a mezzanine, which is essentially an unsecured, unsubordinated debt from a small boutique mezz player in Detroit. I got my PhD in finance putting that deal together. Oh my goodness, the sleepless nights. I look at it now and said, whoa, my goodness. I remember so vividly when these guys said yes. Because we could not have done it without them. It was very expensive capital. That's why we paid them back a year later, because it was so expensive. And then in 2001, we were looking to grow the business. We needed to make some investments. We went back to them again, and they were more than happy because we had a track record and we paid them back. You keep your word, guess what? They want your business. And again in 2005, they came back in again. We did a major recap for some growth capital. They wanted to be a part of that. So they came back in 2005. So over the years, I was able to raise over $50 million to grow my business. Let me stop there because now it's your turn. What questions do you have for me? How can I share some key learnings, some perspectives on starting and growing and exiting a business? In 2009, I got a call from a private equity firm that said, we'd like to buy you. And first I said no. Then they said, well, let's get together. And I started to think about what succession would look like. I had two daughters neither of them interested in running this business. One's a lawyer, the other is a elementary school teacher. They had no interest in this business. And so the sense is, what do you do with it after you poured your life into it? And so after a couple of meetings, some negotiations, I finally exited July 14, 2009 to Sun Capital Partners. And as a footnote, my company that was used as a sort of a platform by Sun Capital now is about $1.4 billion business. They've done any number of add-on acquisitions to the platform they bought from me. Okay, I've talked enough. Questions, please. Frank.
Carl, thank you again for coming out and sharing your plight with your business. Talk to me about how, when you were going through these decisions, could you share with us, you're going through these decisions to grow. What were some of the conversations like with, you know, with your senior staff, with your team, with your, you know, your accountants? To talk about those types of things when you were actually contemplating, you know, the expansion and things of that nature. Because even though you were president of the company, you still probably had a support team that you guys had to strategically plan that.
Oh yeah, I don't want for a minute to give the impression that I did this all by myself. I could never have done this without some incredible people. First with the people starting at home, because it takes an awful lot to run and grow a business of the size that I did without having a supportive home base. And then I think it just comes down to, first of all, Frank, having a decision with yourself as to whether or not you even want to do this. Because there's so many entrepreneurs I know, business owners I know across the country, who grow a business to a particular size, is comfortable, is providing them with a very comfortable lifestyle, and that's it. They don't want to have a business of the size and scale and complexity that I had. It's not something that they're interested in. So you first got to want to do it with yourself. And I recognized in 1997, after we had become a successful package design engineering business, that to run a manufacturing operation of the size that I envisioned, I was not going to be able to do that. Because I was a marketing, product design, product development, marketing guy. I was not an operations manufacturing guy at all. If I were going to do that, I needed a management team around me to help me run the business. And so when that entity became available for sale, it was being run by a management team. And so one of the first things I did was to gather them all together and ask if they were interested in staying with the business and helping me grow it to scale. Of course, you got to have a vision you put before them to say, these are the things that we're going to do to take this business. When I bought it, it was about a $50 million business. And these are the things we're going to do to grow it. And I need you aligned with me if we're going to be successful in doing that. And to show my commitment to you, I allowed all of the 13 key managers that were running that division to have an own equity stake, to the extent that they could raise the money and pay the market price. Some got second mortgages on their home and raised whatever they could, $25,000 investment, $50,000 investment. I allowed them to have skin in the game. Because now with skin in the game, I know that their interest and my interests were always aligned. And once I got them on board, that team became my core. We had monthly team meetings, quarterly off-sites. We review performance of the business, strategy for moving forward, whether this acquisition that we've contemplated made sense or not. So it became a collective sort of effort. So I don't want anyone to think that this is an exclusive Carl Highsmith. No, you've got to have a team that you trust, that you embrace, that bring together strengths that you don't have, expertise that you don't have. Really, really important. So thanks for asking the question, because I don't want to leave the impression here, when I leave here, wow, that guy was a brilliant, genius guy who figured it all out by himself. No. No. Yes?
Entrepreneurs are special breeds of people. It's very difficult to find out exactly what it is that makes them successful. What do you think made you a good entrepreneur?
That's a very good question, and come back tomorrow, because I was asked to come back tomorrow and talk about that. No, but I think are entrepreneurs born or are they made? I think they can be made, because I was not a born entrepreneur. It was Dr. Holden who inspired me to think about entrepreneurship. What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? I think a vision. When I started this business, I knew I was gonna, run a customer-focused, operationally excellent, innovative company. That was a vision. And everything else I did over the years was to fulfill that vision. So I think it takes a vision. It takes, I think, courage. Because I've met so many corporate guys like me who were smarter than me, who could have done this, but they weren't comfortable going home and telling the missus, I'm gonna quit my job. I don't know where paycheck is gonna come from. It takes courage to do that. And sometimes I'm finding, because we teach entrepreneurship to high schoolers at our center, CONNCAT, I'm finding that it's more prevalent in urban minority communities. We just don't appreciate the power of entrepreneurship, business ownership. And we're trying to change that, to let people know that there is an alternative to going to work for somebody. So courage is absolutely required, and tenacity, because you're gonna fail. I mean, I failed any number of times in those first few years, but you have to get up and say, okay, what did I learn from that failure? I must have made 200 calls in those first 2 years, and everyone said no, 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 no. But you take away from each of those no's, well, what could I have done differently? Till you finally get to, we can have you take a look at this. One of the things I learned that actually got me the J&J opportunity, I said to the purchasing manager, what is a project, what's your most difficult challenge? What is it that you have not had success solving? May I look at it? That's when she reached in the bottom drawer and said, well, here's reach. So I learned over the years, what are the things that you could do to position yourself to get an opportunity? So learning, continuous learning, which is probably the fourth one as well. You can't be a successful entrepreneur if you're not a lifelong learner, because there's so many things that are gonna come at you that you have to figure out. And you've got to be willing to put in the time to learn it. So a lifelong learner. So those are sort of the essential elements, I think. But I think those things can be learned and taught. I don't believe that entrepreneurs are necessarily born.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Forgive me, but is this thought nagging me? Which is, after all this, so what? How does it tie back to your experience with Dr. Holden? Can you link all these experience, your today, back to that very comment from Dr. Holden?
I can. I'm glad you asked me, because my next slides talk to what has been my life's work since I sold my business. And I'm glad you remembered why Dr. Holden, the context around Dr. Holden's lecture. How do you go about impacting, changing the community through entrepreneurship and wealth creation? There's a center about 4 blocks from here called CONNCAT, and I invite each of you to come visit us. We're called the Connecticut Center for Arts and Technology. We're at Forest Science Park, and we're focused on a few things, but probably the most significant one is we're trying to instill hope within the community that has lost hope. We provide technical skills training to the unemployed and underemployed. We provide an after-school arts program for urban kids, photography, digital arts. We have a summer entrepreneurship program because I believe so much in the power of entrepreneurship. So we're training kids, orienting kids to an alternative to working for someone. The center has been open since, we'll celebrate our 6th anniversary in a few months. We've trained hundreds of people within the New Haven area for rewarding jobs at Yale Haven Hospital, clinics throughout the region. That's our facility, that's what we look like. We are a nonprofit. We have an operating budget of about $2.3 million a year. We received no state funding, no local funding, no federal funding. It's all privately raised money that I contribute and I raise from other philanthropists in the area. The center is modeled after Mr. Bill Strickland. Bill Strickland is a MacArthur Genius Prize recipient out of Pittsburgh. Our center is one of 10 around the world, including Accra, Israel, was opened last October. CHI-CAT in Chicago was opened a few months ago on the south side of Chicago, and we all have the same mission, to take poor people, transform their lives by giving them hope, giving them technical skills, life skills training, and working with major employers in the area to give them a more rewarding life. Those are the kids, our after-school program. We have a summer program that teaches the Harlem Renaissance. So we have 12-year-olds scatting like Cap Calloway. I saw it a few weeks ago. We adopted a local school near us, Lincoln Bassett, was one of the failing schools in New Haven. Actually was part of what's called a commissioner's network, where the state education commissioner actually took over governance of the school, selected us to partner with that school to provide after-school training, after-school programming for the kids. We provide technical skills training for the parents of those kids. So you're absolutely right, it comes full circle. Why Dr. Holden's message was so powerful and important. So thank you for asking the question and allowing me to use the rest of my slides.
One question, sir. First of all, I must commend you for your outstanding and inspiring accomplishments. You said something about going into entrepreneurship because I came in at the later end of your presentation. And what I learned was you went into business by buying an existing business.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, as you probably know, there is a new demographic change going on now. Most baby boomers have businesses that they want to get out of, but nobody's really ready or able to buy them. Now, I happen to have done exactly what you did, but I had 2 experiences recently, which is going to be the undertone for my question. Now, what about if somebody is selling their business to you because they couldn't monetize it, but because you're only a financial buyer and you needed to keep them because you mentioned you had a team around you.
Yep.
Now, before you are able to transition to a newly groomed management team,
Yep.
you will need to rely on the existing owner. Now, how do you manage a situation whereby the owner is actually trying to see you fail so that they can take back the business?
Oh my goodness. The owner is trying to see you fail so we can take back the business.
After you've actually paid them.
Okay. Is it sort of an earn-out scenario where there's some money that changes hands at the transaction, but most of the money is going to change hands at some point in the future as the business is successful? And if you're not successful, then he gets to take it back, and you've lost the money you've given him and all the payments you've made because you couldn't meet the milestones. My advice and counsel to aspiring entrepreneurs, and in that scenario, admit what you don't know, own up to what you don't know, acknowledge what you don't know, and don't simply enter into a transaction because you want to own a business. If you don't have the skill yourself, the expertise yourself, and you can't acquire it, you can't collaborate with it, you can't get it to join you, to make sure that that business advances, moves forward, then my counsel is that don't do that transaction. That's not something you want to do because you're setting yourself up for failure. You've got to, if I hadn't gotten management on board in '98, I probably would not have bought that division from Alius Lanza because I knew I did not have the skill or expertise to run it. I know I didn't. And to me, it was like, which comes first? I mean, you gotta have the infrastructure, the expertise, skills in first before you leap, before you acquire that business. So my counsel was, I don't like earn-out situations. I don't like earn-out scenarios. I just don't like them. I've seen so many of them go wrong. But you gotta have the expertise before you decide to do a transaction. If that makes sense. I saw another one. Did I? Yes.
One of the things noticed in your presentation was, I think, a site off and out of the U.S. and Canadian packaging.
Yes.
It just brings to mind, my name is Glenn Menifee. I'm with the BBA and also owner of Menifee Associates Consulting. We're a business consulting firm. And I've had a recent experience before where I actually qualified a potential customer out in which didn't think that it would have been viable for me, and it was because they were an international firm that had some unrealistic expectations about business setup, and they were a Chinese firm. And one of the things that brought to mind when I saw your presentation was kind of similar thing in which didn't go through with the deal with them, but you were in Canada.
Yes.
And not, for instance, maybe like even Mexico. So just maybe some thoughts around how, from an international perspective, because I think that's one of the other things, of course, right? Scaling is going beyond the United States, right? And that the world is much bigger than that, than us here. So how, one, did you choose maybe a difference like that between Canada and Mexico? And then maybe just in general considerations about how you do think about growth and scale from an international perspective.
Okay, very good question. It's amazing how globalization is under assault these days by so many different places. For us, Canada made sense. In our industry, what you attempt to do, you attempt to locate your facilities in proximity to where your customers are. And so if you were to look at London, Ontario, where our plant was, London, Ontario is actually further south than Hartford, Connecticut. If you don't believe me, try it. Take a line and take Hartford, Connecticut, and draw that line across a map to the west coast, and you'll find that London, Ontario sits further south than Hartford, Connecticut. That's because of the configuration of the Great Lakes. And so London, Ontario is really strategic in terms of its location to where our customers are. So that's what drove our decision to have our facility in London, Ontario. There are differences. You have to recognize what the differences are when you go outside of the States. Our entity in London, Ontario was a ULC as opposed to an LLC, which is all our other plants were in the US. That's unlimited liability corporation. Labor laws were different. Even expectations of benefits are different. Maternity leaves in Canada, you have a baby, I have to keep that job open for you for a year, as opposed to here in the States where it's, so you have to recognize what the differences are. And actually one member of my management team was Canadian. And so that was a way of making sure you understand the cultural, legal differences. So I would never want to go to a country and have an operation where I don't have someone on the ground who is part of my team that can help me understand the landscape and avoid the pitfalls. So I think that's rule number one. Make sure that you understand what the marketplace looks like where you're looking to do business, and try to have someone on the ground loyal to you, sort of aligned with your interest. But if it's strategic, if it makes sense, then you do it. We had a venture with a firm in Monterrey, Mexico. We opted not to put assets on the ground there. Instead, we opted to partner with a firm there because one of our large customers, SC Johnson, relocated a large facility there, and they wanted us to manage the supply chain. And so we partnered with a local Mexican firm to do that, as opposed to putting our assets there. So those are sort of my observations around international outside of the U.S. Hope that's helpful. Yes.
Two questions quickly.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about your succession plan.
Yeah.
And well, first, are you a shareholder in the company you sold the business to?
Okay.
Secondly, why did you take the decision to sell completely instead of grooming someone in-house who has worked with you all the while to run the company and you remain part of it? I'm just wondering whether that series that you lost the black community, I mean, because the P&G, the Unilever, the Guinness, they're still the community a bit like that and just moved through generations. So I'm just wondering, because that's important to me, why you took that kind of decision at this point in your life, instead of running the business continuously or having the team that you have groomed all this while, take over the business and continue while you keep some stock options there.
Okay, very, very good questions. And the answer is, the original transaction was structured so that I held an interest. So I had about a 15% interest in the business after I sold it to Sun Capital. And I was part of I was actually vice chair of the managing board. And I go to the quarterly meetings and I participate. But it's something about being vice when you've been chair. There's something about offering advice versus deciding. There's something about feeling passionate about customers and what's in the customer's best interest, and knowing that you may have to sacrifice a short term for a longer term, and having a private equity firm feel differently. And so for me, it took about 6 months to realize this was not going to work. I couldn't sit here and be part of my old company and not be where I was. And so for me, it was personal. So I went to the principal at Sun Capital and said, I'd like to exit totally. And they were very accommodating. They understood fully. They said it's not atypical, so I didn't feel, they made me comfortable in that we kind of knew that you were going to be stressed to want to stay with this. So that's the reason that I exited totally. Now, why didn't I look at some other exit option? I did. Once I got the offer from Sun Capital, I looked at an ESOP, which is, for those who are not familiar with it, you're essentially selling the company to the employees. All right. We looked at trying to pull that together for the sake of my employees because I felt so fond. I was so fond of them. But we couldn't quite put together a structure that worked well for us. So that ended up not being an option. There were a couple of the managers who said, okay, once the ESOP fell through, we'd like to buy it from you. And they were not able to really rally up the financing required that was acceptable to me. It was going to be a situation where there were earnouts. They'll say, we'll give you some now, we'll give you some now, later, and later, and later. And I wasn't comfortable with that. If I was going to be out, I was, hey, okay, give me my chips now. So I think that was why I did what I did. But you're absolutely right. I looked at options. Once the offer came from Sun Capital and it was legitimate, it was something I could really pull a trigger on, okay, what other things could I do for the sake of my employees? So very, very good question.
One more question from John.
Yes, sir.
Councilman, my question is, I know you have gone through buying companies in addition to your own. What are some of your plans that you decide on buying a company? How do you think about the payment plan for something like that?
Well, first, there's got to be a reason.
Sure.
There's got to be a really strong strategic reason. And every acquisition we did was for a reason. We looked at what their strengths were, what were their advantages, what were their attributes which were different than ours, but more importantly, what strategic advantage would they give us if we owned them? In the case of Focus Packaging, I think I mentioned it to you, the fact that they had this expertise in flexographic printing, and we wanted that. They were the experts. They knew more about it, and we wanted that expertise within our company because our guys could learn from them. So that was really strategically important for us. The initial acquisition of Swiss Lanza, their plants, that was the one acquisition that enabled us to really develop the scale we needed to have to grow the business to the next level. The packaging machinery service acquisition in 2003, we needed the capability to design machines that our packages ran across because our customers were depending more and more upon us to recommend complete solutions from designing the package, manufacturing the package, then finding the machines that they could use to put their product into our package at really high speed. And so there was a reason that packaging machinery service was acquired by us. But having strategically thought through what value, what synergies can flow from it is, I think, probably the most important thing that you can do with an acquisition that you're contemplating. Hope that's responsive. Now, I do have for each of you sort of a graphic. I promised the cameraman I was not going to walk around, but I am. This sort of is a chronology. It takes you through the years of our company in terms of some of the highlights. So hopefully you'll find this to be interesting as you leave. So please grab one before you leave. And thank you very much for your questions and your attention.
To call up to the table Gillian Menafe, who will moderate the session. She's with the BBA. The Black Business Alliance is basically moderating the access to capital session. So please have a seat while I call up the... Okay, there is a mic here. Okay, let me invite to the podium Deborah. Is Deborah here? Oh, sorry, Deborah. I was looking all over the place. Deborah Moxam is the VP Business and Commercial Financing of ISOE Commercial Capital. Deborah, you're welcome. Please have your seat. I would also like to invite to the podium Mr. Eric Ighalo. Eric is the CEO of Eric and Partners.
His company helps companies that are startups and established businesses to raise funds in Nigeria. He is also a stockbroker. If you want to take your company public in Nigeria, he's somebody you can go to. He will give us insights about raising money to fund business from the African-Nigerian perspective. Eric, you're welcome. I also want to call up to the podium Mr. Seni Hazzan. Seni is actually an alum of the Yale School of Management. I'm not sure he has had the opportunity of presenting here, just like the first speaker before. So we are bringing him back. Seni has worked with Goldman Sachs in the New York area. Seni was also the CEO of FCMB, which is one of the major banks in Nigeria, capital markets. He is the author of a very successful book called Building from Ground Zero. He's now the CEO of Development 2 Inc. He's a man with a wealth of experience, and we are glad and privileged to have him. I am going to turn the mic over to Gillian to lead us in this section. Yes, you can use this.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay.
You can,
Yep.
I guess the mic is...
Oh, okay.
Yep. Sorry, a big omission. I'm sorry about that. Why say Eugene? Sorry. I apologize. I apologize profusely. I wish to call on Mr. Eugene Cornelius from the Small Business Administration, Washington, D.C. Those who were here earlier had Mr. Peter Kazamias, who is Associate Director for International Trade with the SBA. Eugene is the Deputy Associate Director. He will be talking more in-depth about the access to capital issues with respect to the Small Business Administration. Thank you very much, and welcome, Eugene.
Hello, everyone. Is this good? Okay. Ghislaine Menifee with the Black Business Alliance. We are very happy to be sponsoring this weekend. Part of it is mostly because it's very fundamental to the core mission that I know all of you heard earlier from the president of BBA, Mr. Frank Dixon, in which we talked about one of the more fundamental key components to staying in business, right? It's the capital, it's the money, right? You need money to make money, correct? So this is one of the things that is a core to BBA because we want to grow and foster the minority, the Black, and the diverse community, business professional community in the US and beyond. The synergies with this discussion you're about to hear now is near and dear to BBA as well for another reason, and it's just very representative of one of the programs for which we are leading statewide for Connecticut. So BBA is the program administrator for the state of Connecticut for a program, MBRLF. It stands for Minority Business Revolving Loan Fund. This is dedicated for especially the underserved and unserved communities, Black communities, Hispanics, where they are looking for access to capital. What we're doing is, especially this year, this program has been enhanced with the involvement of BBA because we are going to be the marketing leg for the state. One of the things that I think is important to understand is that many times we find in these minority communities that a lot of times it's an awareness problem, right? It's not that the programs aren't there. Yes, there's things like unconscious biasness that happens all the time, in which this is some of the struggles, undercurrents that really prevent a lot of times, especially our community, the Black community, from being able to have as easy access to capitals as maybe some of our peers in other communities can. But when you understand what's out there, that allows you to have at least a little bit more of an opportunity to go after what's going to help you to be successful. So what BBA is going to be doing is providing that marketing, that awareness, that outreach within our Black communities, within our minority communities, to say, hey, there's a program out here for you. And if you qualify, if you can put a little bit of effort going after it, we're gonna help you to do that. We're gonna provide you technical assistance. We're going to make you aware of how your business looks, how you are positioned within the industry, and help you to package yourself so you can take advantage of it. We are not going to just give money as well to these businesses that we're marketing and we're doing the outreach for. We want to empower them through education, through technical assistance. And so BBA, as part of this whole effort, and why we are charged as the program administrator for this program, is because we give that complete package as the intake mechanism for the state of Connecticut. So we are, throughout the state, going to be hosting fundamental workshops, discussions, technical assistance, like this entire conference is, which is going to educate and empower our minority entrepreneurs across the state so they can understand that there is resources, many of them available to them. BBA will be a resource to them. They can be educated, they can further the sustainment opportunities and availability of their business. And so we hope that through this conference and through our efforts like the Minority Business Revolving Loan Fund, we are going to continue making a powerful impact within our minority communities to continue helping them get the access to capital that they need, that's fundamental to the sustainment and empowerment of their business, of themselves. I'm going to have those folks here that have joined us, and we thank you again for your involvement here today. Like for you to do a couple of things for us just to kick everything off. So of course, your name, who you represent, a couple of tidbits about the products and services that you represent as well. And then if you can just answer a quick short blurb. So we always, when we engage with anybody, right, we want to understand the WIFM question, right? What's in it for me? I think we always ask that. I think it will be very powerful, especially because we're under this guise of access to capital. If you can help our audience understand when you do talk about your product and service with that access to capital hat on, what's in it for them? So if perhaps when you say, here's my product and service, maybe this is why you would want to talk to me, right? Okay, so start with Ms. Deborah.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? I am Deborah Moxam with ISO Commercial Capital. What is ISO? ISO stands for In Search of Excellence, and we are a commercial mortgage brokerage firm, and what we focus on is helping the small business owner start their own business and grow their own business. So if you have a client, or if anyone is sitting here, pretty much anyone that's sitting here needs money. Okay, anyone that is sitting here or is thinking of having their own business needs money. First place you're going to go is to your family and friends after your own savings account and your own 401k. After that, we're going to the we're going to go to the Small Business Administration. After that, we're going to one of the lenders that have business grants. Now, when you're all said and done, you're going and someone declines you or says you're too young to be in the business or you don't simply qualify, then you're going to come to ISO. You're going to come to a mortgage broker who has leverage with over 75 different lenders. Now, we are a little different from the Small Business Administration because their requirements are very strict. And because it's the government's money, you can understand they would be strict. Also, when you go to the banks have a lot of documentation that they require. Some people do not know where to start. They do not know how to fill out a PFS. What is a PFS? Personal financial statement. What is an executive summary? A lot of people do not know how to handle those. Now, our company represents not only Connecticut, we also represent other states, so we are multi-states. We take care of fix and flips for those entrepreneurs who are looking to leverage their money and increase it. So when you think of a mortgage broker or a mortgage consultant, you're looking for someone who is there to hold your hand, because the banks don't simply have the time. They don't have the time, they don't have the resources to help you with that PFS. So sometimes people say, well, what's in it for me?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you get paid? Well, you know, everyone here and every entrepreneur starts their business to get paid. Well, why do we have to pay for an application? Because the time that we invest into each and every business is time that we can be investing into someone who is truly in need of that opportunity and of those funds. So a lot of people will say, well, these banks did not ask me for an application fee. They're not charging me anything. That's fine. Go back to the banks, and when they decline you, I'm still right here, ready and waiting to help you with that paperwork. So we are all intertwined in some way, also with Jolene and their business and the Minority Loan Fund. You have to start somewhere. Alan and I were having a conversation yesterday, and as he prepares his documentation for his loans, he says he doesn't have the time for his own loan because he knows how it can consume his time, his efforts, and sometimes we just do not have that time. And time is valuable. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Eric Ighalo. I basically provide financial advisory services and training for businesses and help them raise finances. Oftentimes also we put our finances first as seed capital in businesses and then watch them grow. And when they're supposed to be mature for the market, we help support them being listed on the stock exchange. I want to share two stories very quickly to give the kind of scenarios that happen sometimes in a very different economic setting like Nigeria. Many years back, we wanted to do a real estate investment project and began the process of raising initial seed funding for about $400 million. It's about $2.5 million. We did equity placement for that. We purchased part of the properties and we had to go to the bank to get long-term funding. And the bank said to us, once you break ground and you begin to build and we see you do piling, we can now kick in our long-term finances. We signed the papers, they made commitments that they were going to provide 1.2 billion naira to continue the process. Only for us to have made commitments and we brought out the project halfway and the bank said to us, sorry, there's been a challenge in the economy, we can no longer meet our commitments. The cash flows were good, the projections were good, we had off-takers, everything looked rosy when we began the project. It's taken us 3-4 years to come to that position, but suddenly the bank said, sorry, we can't continue with this. We are not able to finance it. And so, look, but we have a signed offer letter. We made commitment on this basis, but well, we're sorry. And suddenly we had a White Elephant project on our hands. I traveled extensively trying to find buyers to take up the project. And when you operate in an economy that have inconsistent policies and they could shift, it becomes a real challenge raising funding. Very different from maybe the situation here in the US when it's this, signed, it's signed. Sometimes it's not always like that. And I remember one of my partners, we had an Indian company who came and bought off the investment at very, 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 very ridiculous. I mean, there was no option but to sell it because we needed to pay off, where we took some of the initial seed funding from. And he went to the hospital from that transaction and never recovered and died. So, money business is serious business. Okay. Raising capital is serious business. Yep. Yesterday, I was chatting with one of our friends here, and he told me a very inspiring story, which is my second story. And that's what we do as a company. And he said to me, I've grown my business. I've done very well. I really have we've done very well. My kids are out of school, out of college. And so I was settling down to now buy a Porsche car and just enjoy my life. And so I got news that my mother died. I said, okay, I have to travel for 3 days to do the burial in Africa. So he called up the car dealer and said, look, give me 3 weeks or so. I have to go to Africa to do a burial. When I come back, I'll pay for the Porsche car. And he goes to Africa and does the burial. But when he lands in Africa, he looks around and says that, wow, this land is filled with gold. It's all over the place. Not been to Africa for like 10, 20 years. And found that he could buy 12 plots of land with far less money than the Porsche. Found that he could do a real estate investment. And found out that I could double this money here. I didn't think I've changed so much. And he gets back to the US and the car dealer calls him. How about the Porsche you wanted to buy? He said, Porsche? I've changed my mind. I'm no longer buying Porsche. I'm doing something somewhere. And that's my job. My job is trying to support entrepreneurs and just looking for money, particularly when it comes to Nigeria and Africa, to have them engage in what's going on the ground. Sometimes what the news carry is very skewed. And people are very concerned and afraid when they think about Africa, there's a red flag about what's going on. And it took him coming after 10, 15 years to find that truly it's the land of opportunity. And just a switch of the first source of capital is personal, savings personal, earning, you could do far much more. One of my jobs in American Partner is to invite investors to Nigeria, and help them engage on the ground discussions, interfacing and intermediating with banks and soft capital. I shared the last story, the first story that happened like 10 years back. This year, we're involved with 2 fundraising transactions. One is for an American company coming to do agriculture in our country, big time, about 4,000 acres, a goat farm, a cassava farm hiring equipment, and we're in the process of helping them structure a 2.5 million seed funding. It's currently going well because of what the Honorable Minister shared in the morning about some of the reforms that have taken place in the country. And one of the key reforms is making it easy for entrepreneurs to access capital. And a number of government programs are in place right now to support that process. First of them is the Bank of Industry, which the government which gives financing to small, mediums, and big time companies. Also, there is a company called Biosciences. They're pushing to provide, biotech technology issues, molecular biology issues in the country. They're raising like another $2 million seed capital. Now, up till as I speak.
I'm sorry. Do you mind? I just would like to, because we have a lot, we want to get into a lot. So
right.
I just would like the other two gentlemen on your
Oh,
right
sure.
to introduce themselves
Okay.
and allow folks to understand what organizations that they
You do.
represent, okay?
Thank you. No
Thank
problem.
you so much.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to take it.
Thank you. Okay.
No,
Good.
I'm Seni Hazzan, and I'm glad to be back at Yale. Because exactly 24 years ago, I was walking down to the next building because I went to Yale School of Management, so it's glad to be back here. I'm the CEO of Development 2 Incorporated, and I'm actually sitting on the extreme end of the spectrum.
Okay.
I want to tell you, you don't need money to make money. All you need is to understand needs that are available in the marketplace, be able to package it, and all the monies you need will be at your beck and call.
Okay.
That's what I do.
Excellent. And I have to follow that. No. Okay. So, good afternoon. As you heard from SBA this morning, I will tell you that SBA is the United States federal government, and my job, I'm Eugene Cornelius. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator for International Trade, and I have been in this position for over a year now. And prior to that, I oversaw all of the domestic programs of SBA as all 50 states and U.S. territories, and now I handle all international. What we do at the SBA is we provide access to capital, and we provide access to capital in a variety of ways for a variety of uses. Our uses of funds goes from buying equipment and inventory to starting a business to buying a business to putting together a business or whatever you want to do from every stage of your life cycle of your business, from beginning to end, from the point in which you have the dream and to the point in when you want to exit. SBA is there for you, providing access to capital in many different ways to do that. And we do that primarily through several of our capital access programs. We have guarantees of upwards of $4 to $5 million for small businesses in capacity for certain things, and we have 504 programs for buying real estate, and we have equipment and working capital in all kinds of lines of starting a business. In addition to that, we have what we call our 3 C's and D. And you heard Peter mention that earlier this morning, that Associate Administrator. Access to capital is one, but counseling and training is also another one. We have a network of small business development centers, our service corps of retired executives, people who have owned businesses, have been in the seats that you are now sitting, and are lending back their expertise to help you develop that business plan and help you throughout that business life cycle. And in addition to that, we also put out grants to states to deal with local economic development groups and we put that money out so that they can train at a local level, because we understand all economic development is local, and we give states money so that they could tailor those business accoutrements to their particular jurisdiction and whatnot. And in addition to that, we help businesses when an unfortunate event happens as a national disaster. Those are the key components of what we do. But what I want to talk about is the uses of funds. And I think that is important to know. And I concur with the gentleman before me. But I also concur with the gentleman that was before me on this, because what SBA does is we take away some of that risk. We don't take away all the risk, because if there's no risk, there's no skin in the game for you. But we do take away some of that risk, and we do that through our guarantees. When we work with our 7,000 lenders across the United States and the international markets, to make loans to small businesses, we can guarantee up to 90% of what they lend you, that we will make sure that they get paid. And they will take the point of the U.S. government back guarantee to make you that loan. Now, why do we do that? Maybe because, as you heard the young lady say, banks look at you and their underwriting department decide that you have not enough experience in that particular area, or you're not familiar with that particular market, or you don't have the collateral behind them to assess their risk and their underwriting requirements in order for them to accept your risk. The SBA comes in as a guarantor to say that we believe in this person, we believe that this business plan is developed in such a way that we will take on that risk for you, Mr. Lender, and we want you to make that loan, even though they may not have, under your underwriting ability, the expertise that you would like them to have, the collateral you would like them to have, or the familiarity with the territory in which they are operating, be it domestic or international. And that's basically what SBA does. In this area, we have 21 USAADO centers across the United States that can help you. And we will walk you through this. Our services are free because you already paid for them as taxpayers. And they're in Boston for this area and New York. And you can go to those USAADO centers, or you can go to SBA online through sba.gov and get the counseling and services you need. If you go to sba.gov, you can type in your zip code, it will hook you up with a small business development center, and they can help you with what you need and how you need to know. SBA is also one in that training and in the counseling that will tell you if indeed you do need a debt loan or a equity loan, venture capitalist. So in addition to our loan programs, we have investment court services, and we will also tell you when you don't need financing. So we are there for you. And the last thing I would like to say before we go on so that I can get the questions and answers and everything you have, if SBA does not meet your needs and does not have what you qualify for our programs, we also have links and experiences and liaisons to 13 different other federal government agencies that provide other services such as Exim Bank and OPIC and other agencies that provide financial services. So not only does SBA offer you this, SBA can refer you and link you to where you need to go. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for letting folks understand where you are in regards to their process and how they look at how they would target and tackle access to capital. So access to capital is more than what you just talked about with uses of funds. And I think that it was great that you ended on that, because I think that sometimes some of the things I know I find when I talk to clients around getting a financial plan together that's incorporated in their overall business plan is really understanding what that number means, okay? And as we know, uses of funds says, all right, it's a calculation, it's purposeful. Deborah, I want to start with you on this, especially with what you do for your services. Help us businesses understand, how should we think, how should we approach really kind of getting that number together, that purposeful number, with other considerations like even contingencies, right? So thinking about all those things, can you help us understand how you talk to businesses so that they kind of don't forget anything and kind of put that full number together that really helps them? Because I don't know if most people know, but you know, first year of business, as you know, most people go out of business, 80% statistic. And of those that do remain, 75% more of them will fail by year 3. And one of the top 3 reasons why a business will go out of business is because they don't have enough money. So I do think that this is something, it's not a simple math, as easy as people might think. So if you could just help us understand how to approach and think optimally about how to really get that number so that we don't run out of money, or that we do cover everything that we really need or may have not thought of, but ends up becoming a business expense?
That's a good question, Jolene. Let me start, and we may go hand in hand with Eugene, because we do a lot of SBA loans and preparing our clients and our small businesses for SBA loans. So when we have to, as a startup, you have to take into consideration your overhead, most definitely where your business is going to be. A lot of people don't think about that. Some people run it out of their kitchen, their kitchen table, which is always the best place to go. But when you think about going into a building, going into an office space, think about the overhead expenses. In addition, the insurance. People are not taking into consideration. Insurance expenses can go into the thousands, not the hundreds. A lot of us think, oh, just $1,000. When you're all said and done, you're looking at about $3,000 to $5,000, and that's just to begin. Right. Also, when we're looking into the expectations for the next 12 to 18 months, you have to take into consideration your products. Also, advertising expenses, which is always underestimated. In order to grow your business, you need to advertise. No one knows about it, no one will know about it, and you won't grow your business. In addition, employees, 1099 workers, everyone thinks we can do it on our own. And as we've heard from our other speakers, we cannot do it on our own. And that's why we need to reach out to and leverage our services of other clients and other businesses so that that business can grow. So we take into consideration rent, employees, advertising, and products.
Thank you.
Also, your equipment, most definitely.
I like to add, that was very good and very good. You can go to SBA, they have a resource guide in every community, and it has a 10-point guide on how to do a business plan, and it talks about these very things. And let me give you a secret that you may not know. Whether a bank deals with SBA or not, they use that plan. Every bank in the United States uses that plan. Just a hint. But what I would like to add to what you just heard, which was very comprehensive, is make sure you calculate the cost of capital in your equation in that 18 months. And you calculate the percentage risk, acceptable risk, of accounts receivables, because that can kill you.
Yep.
You have to look at your cost of goods sold and the cost of your inventory and what you have, but you also have to look at the cost of your sales and the percentage of annual cost of receivables. And what that looks like. Is your average cost of receivables 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and do you have the cash flow to carry you through that portion of that area? And that is a working capital issue that may need debt or may not. So you need to look at that.
Mr. Hazzan, how about when we talk about raising the capital? So can you give folks a little bit of insight? I know you also have a principle that says perhaps it's not necessarily that you need money to make money, but okay, how about the other way of, well, I need money, I don't have any. How do I go about raising capital so I can sustain my business?
Thank you. Now, when I said you don't need money to make money, I inverted the entire picture.
Sure.
Now, when you speak with many potential entrepreneurs, they've never really understood the problems they're trying to solve.
Right.
Now, the underlying thing is that you go into business, want to solve a problem.
That's right.
In return for which the customers are glad to exchange their hard-earned money.
That's right.
For solving their problems.
That's right.
Now, the first assignment is, before you even think about capital, the question is, do you have a viable business in place?
Right.
Because you might raise all the money in the world.
Right.
If the idea is not sustainable economically, it's just a matter of time.
Okay.
It's like the Titanic.
Yeah.
The Titanic was the biggest ship ever built, but because of the hole, it started sinking.
Sure.
So when you talk about business plan and the need for capital, capital is raised for you to scale a proven concept.
That's right.
So when I said you don't need money, I was saying capital is not the first order of priority.
Oh, absolutely. And I wasn't in, yeah,
No,
I
no,
get it.
I mean, that was why I said I invited.
That's why I got
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
See,
you got it.
Every time you meet entrepreneurs, the first thing they are saying is, I need money, I need money, I need money. And the question is, do you even know if your idea is scalable?
Right.
So to answer your question, the first thing I need to do is, number one, do I have enough, big market in the place where I believe my revenue is more than the cost associated
Sure.
with delivering whatever I needed to do. So once I'm able to determine that, the next question is, am I able to do that myself? Which is where, if I have a full-time job, can I scale this, doing this part-time? I love what he said in terms of working capital. If I have enough sales, then do I have the opportunity to have somebody who can do that for me while the number of orders I'm getting is more than the cost that is required of me to scale the business? So once I'm able to establish that, I can then approach either, sorry, your name again?
Deborah.
I can either approach Deborah or SBA, saying, Deborah,
Go to Deborah.
Go to SBA first.
The reason I'm saying that is because once you are able to understand that, then you can now sit down and put your business plan together.
That's right.
Your business plan is nothing more than your organized thought
That's right.
as to how your business works,
That's right.
which is your business model, what the opportunity is.
Yep.
Now, what is the size of the operation I want to accomplish between now and the next 12 months?
That's right.
That's where your working capital,
Yes.
your overheads, your advertisement, and all those things come into play.
That's right.
So at that point in time, I now know what my need is, then how much I can raise either through my own savings, through Deborah, through SBA, or through my friends and families.
Right.
By the time you collate that together, you have a clear picture of what your sources and your uses of funds is.
Yep.
And you can confidently, without any shadow of doubt in your mind, that based on my track record, I can grow this business with X amount of capital in a very simple
Thank you so much. In essence of time, I think I have questions that you guys kind of stole my thunder. You guys covered it so well. So I don't want to ask any more questions. I'd like to engage the audience because I'm sure that, of course, I'm not going to think of everything, right? So we want to open this to the floor. We want to have you guys engage with our four experts here on the panel. Anyone has any questions around some of their comments and insights, or just perhaps something we haven't covered or thought of yet? Sure. Yeah, we could share.
Well, while you're asking for that, Deborah brought up something, and the gentleman here from Nigeria brought up something that I think that is important, because we're talking about Africa, and we're talking about the diverse communities of Africa and the diverse countries of Africa, and we know that Africa has been growing substantially in the last 10 years. And the Africa we have been portrayed in the media is not where we are today. This is the #1 growing economy of the world. Let's get real about it. And if you're going to be serious about it, you need to be engaged with the 13 different agencies of the federal government that has already done the research for you. And you need to go to them and get this information and know what you're hearing, and not listen to the quote unquote fake news that you hear about Africa. I want to make sure everybody hears that. The other thing I want you to know is that not through SBA, but through Exim Bank, you have different types of insurance. You heard Deborah mention the cost of insurance and understanding that in your dial. They have insurance for not only your shipments and for your goods and services, but also insurance against payment, against solvency and political drops and things that you may be concerned about in Africa that really are really lower than you hear in the media, but that's another story. But the point is, these kinds of insurance are available to you, and these are lower costs to you in operations and help you enter markets more feasible. And the third thing I want to mention, you heard the gentleman this morning, I think his name was Hazelwood. He brought up a very good point. We have an agreement, a goal agreement here in the United States. If you are looking at doing your business, going back to what Deborah said, where you do your business is important. If you do your business here in the United States or you do your business on the continent of Africa, looking at the labor laws, looking at the cost of doing those businesses, don't look at raising money so much as looking at the other side of that balance sheet and reducing costs.
That's right.
Reducing costs of travel and logistics and labor and all that, and adding to the economy of Africa, which means you're building their middle class who is going to be your customers and needs the disposable income to buy your product. Understand that circle.
Anyone have any questions? Going once? Eric, you have a last thought?
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
Question I would have is different types of businesses that you might be interested in supporting or you have supported in the past. Manufacturer or customer or servicing type businesses, any particular area of businesses that are you're more inclined to be supportive?
Eric?
Personally, for me, supported agriculture. We've done real estates. Like I said before, we're doing something on biosciences. Back in Nigeria, I think, like the minister said this morning, growing areas includes IT, construction, and agriculture. Food processing, the entire food value chain are areas that both the government is supporting, and we've put in some bit of money in doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Gentleman in the front.
Very difficult to do business in Africa. You living there, what assurances can you give to us that it's not as bad as we hear about it? And maybe you can chime in, Mr.
Well, interestingly, Professor Emayano can attest to this. I mean, for almost 16 years, I did not even fly over Africa because of, the scary news. However, 8 years ago, I had a unique opportunity of being hired as the CEO of one of the premier investment banking, companies there. I was so scared, I didn't even want to go. Now, I want to tell you, just to underscore the sad, story. Most of the things you hear in the news, like you said, are actually fake news. They are fake news because people discover gold, and in order to keep out competitors, they are throwing fake news out there. I want to tell you today, I live in the United States, but 80%, I live and work in the United States, but 80% of our business revenue is actually from Africa.
That's awesome.
Because, one, you have a growing young population. Telecommunication is connecting the continent.
That's right.
Everything is imported. And for you to now have something, because people have to eat, they have to wear clothes, they have to live in homes, they want to watch movies or what have you. but there's nobody to provide that to them. So if you are a person of African descent, whether African American or Caribbean American, I mean, I was in Jamaica about 8 years ago. It was the first time I actually felt as if I was in Africa. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are an African American or even a Caucasian who is a free spirit, I can assure you, you will have a blast, both personally, socially, and economically in Africa. I can tell you that. So many of the things you hear are just not real. But if you are just like Smith, or what's his name, the man who spoke originally, Highsmith, excuse me. If you are adventurous, if you can mitigate your risks, I can assure you, you will have a blast.
Thank you so much.
I chaired with the South African Minister of Economic Development, the Global Entrepreneur Network, earlier this year in March in South Africa. And there was over 20 different African nations at this international forum. And what I saw was phenomenal. And just so you know, as the U.S. Small Business Administration, you would say, why would we be there and why were we there? Because everyone except the African diaspora of the United States was with me. Hear me again. Did you hear me?
Yes.
I want you to hear that. They were climbing to get in there, to get into a conversation with us. They are ready. Your counterparts in other countries, in other devices of this United States are already there.
Yes.
You are not.
That's right.
The reason you heard Peter, my boss this morning, says to you as a political appointee that he was personally driven to be here and literally told me about this and told me you need to be here is because I was enraged that we were not there.
Thank you. We're gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna give the mic back. But thank you guys so much. You've imparted so much wisdom and insights. I want to encourage everyone in the audience to please see all of these fine gentlemen and lady here for any additional information. They have their business cards, of course. And please remember as well that the Black Business Alliance, we are affiliated with USAADO as well as have awesome relationships with all of these professionals here in front of you. So if you do not get a chance in person to meet individually with them, we would be happy to be a conduit like we are with many of the other types of resources that provide you access to capital. Thank you very much.
If you look at the program, we actually have, we're supposed to have a break now and then come back for part 2. But I'm just thinking, can we I think they still have things they want to say. Am I correct? Right? Can if you don't mind, can we extend it to about 15, 30 minutes and just end it instead of going for break and so on, right? So if you want to... So if there are more questions, let's just stretch it for about 15, 30 minutes and just end it instead of going for break and coming back.
So I can make one more comment.
Okay. I just want to be practical. Okay. For instance, Mr. A have created a product with his own money, and I've tested the products. People like the product in the US, and people like that product also in Africa. Now, his problem is he have all the receipt and everything, but where to get the money, where did he start so that he can produce his product that people would like to have? here in the US first, and after in Africa also?
That's a very good question, and I will start to answer it until Eugene returns. For a product that is new, for a product that you want to bring to market, Eugene will be able to attest to that. However, as I assist and help grow and start small businesses, if we have a product, if we have a candle or this bottle, and you want to get it to market, you can start with the SBA, because they will give you money to make this bottle, get the water, and get it to market. It is Eugene, it's about a 6-month process, but it's all worth it. Okay, 4 to 6 months. I will be practical and I will be real. However, SBA is your way to go. The small business will give money for startup costs to get this product to light. Also, there are some banks, if you have assets to leverage against, there are some banks that will work with you. However, most of them will have issues. If you can start with your 401k and liquidate your 401k, I have a very good product that you can leverage your 401k to start up your own business. So there are different ways to go. If you have a 401k, use your own money. If you don't, go to the SBA. If they won't give it, then come to ISO.
But you should try to use your own money first. Cost of capital is very important. And though we're the SBA, our money costs. And you should listen to what Deborah just said, because one of the biggest downfalls in small businesses is not only access to capital, it is cash flow. It is the ability of that 18 months and then in that startup, where you can use your own funds and reduce your cost of capital. You want to do that. I would gladly love to sell you SBA, but I honestly believe you need to understand that first, okay? And it is important that you do, not only for that sake, but with that business plan that I talked about, that 10-point business plan that's in the resource guide of the SBA, and your ability to maintain that on your own without debt makes you bankable in the future for a larger amounts and very interesting to venture capitalists in the future. So you're setting your future ahead when you invest yourself in your own way.
Let me just add to what both Deborah and Eugene said. If indeed there's huge demand for the product here in the US and in Africa, now there are alternative finance sources you can actually utilize. For example, if you have a manufacturer that has been packaging or manufacturing the product for you. Now they've seen how you started with 100 boxes, just as an example, then 2 weeks later you came for 200, then another week you came for 500, from 500 you come for 1,000. Now I'm telling you, that is your easiest source of funding. It's a matter of just going to him and say, hey, Mr. A, you know how I started? In less than 3 months, I've grown from 100 units now to 5,000 units. You know, I've got a huge market in Africa. Will you mind extending me line of credits or credit terms, maybe 90-day terms? Or if you are very bullish and convinced that you have a huge market out there, then maybe paying 20% down for what will have cost you for $1 million package. Are you getting what? So in that regard, you don't need a bank, you don't need an SBA.
Oh, wait, SBA gets a line of credit.
I meant at that early stage. At that early stage. Because if you have your supplier providing that line, so then it is easy. By the time you have the cash coming in, it is even your banker will approach you. Let me give you a real life example. I had a meeting with someone, and 90 days later, he called me and he said, "Who is financing your business?" I said, "Well, just a couple of friends and what have you. I would love to invest in you." And the person personally invested $1 million. $1 million. Just unsolicited. Why? Because people are watching you. And because once you are making money, everybody wants to have a piece of your success. Exactly.
That's true. But lines of credit is something that is underutilized and something that could cost you, can save you a lot of money. And so he is absolutely right. If you are in a supply chain and you are providing a product or service to someone, then, and they have a deeper pocket than you, you do want to look at that and you do want to ask that. And it goes back to what you heard Deborah and I say earlier. When people see that you are not over leveraged and you are not putting yourself in debt, and they see that you are producing and you are having a cash flow, then you become more bankable and you become more valuable to investors. And so that's what that investor saw when in his example. And that happens constantly, you know, and so yes, SBA has wonderful products and services, but these are the things you should be looking at. And these are the things that I tell my staff that they need to educate you on before they give you SBA products and services.
I want to just raise an issue very quickly about if you assess capital by a loan, by debt, and you're not able to pay back, what happens? I think that's another part of the pendulum in terms of educating the entrepreneur. It's not just about assessing capital. There's a discipline that goes with handling that capital and ensuring repayment to grow. Whether you're a small business or you're a big business, I mean, we had two scenarios. Sometime early this year, the Nigerian media was awash with a woman that, you know, jumped off the bridge and committed suicide. And when they made an investigation, found that she took some loan for her business and could no more repay because she had domestic issues, children's schools, children issues to feed, issues that she didn't plan for, and dealing with the sheer, you know, pressure of paying back because the lenders will keep coming back. You know, that's on a small scale. Also, I mean, a few months ago, a guy that many years ago we had done some work for, he grew up his business to about 4.5 billion. You know, but 2 months ago, you know, the Securities and Exchange Commission canceled the license, you know, banned him for life business for fraudulent transactions, because again, you know, there's a culture, there's a discipline that surrounds handling people's money that you borrowed to invest in your business. Now that culture, that discipline, that attitude, you know, entrepreneurs must be taken through that process before they ever come to. So you know, the first place the entrepreneur should start with access to capital would be his own fund or her own fund, and testing the waters. You know, and be willing to submit, you know, by some mentoring processes that, you know, to that discipline on how to handle and separate his business or her business from his or her personal money. In Nigeria, for instance, where we have so many issues that compete for that money, sometimes when you assess capital, suddenly, you know, you want to put some filters in place you didn't have before, and you find that you begin to run into problems. And I thought that it's important to mention the issue that there's a learning, there's a discipline, there's a different mindset, you know, that comes with entering the whole arena of using, you know, using debt to run businesses. As important, we stress that for entrepreneurs.
Any more questions?
Hi, my name is Dixon, and I'm a small business owner around IT firm. We have assets close to almost $500,000, not from loans or SBA or whatever, from personal financing. This past weekend, I was in the DC area trying to close on a government contract. And we got into a conversation whereby the big guys who were once upon a time financed by the SBA got the header above me. And I was wondering, what can the SBA do to help a small business owner like me to bridge the gap between the big guys and the small business, so as in such a way that all the government wants to do is to get a job done, not to play politics about it. So my question now is, what can the SBA do to help a small business to compete with the big guys in terms of insurance and all that the government requires, because the government contracts has so many rules that needs to be followed?
Depend on the kind of small business that you are. If you are certified small businesses, or if you're 8A firm, let me explain that. SBA has contracting responsibility, and so 24 different agencies of the federal government are required to have a goal of 23% that must of their procurements and contracts that must go to small businesses. And SBA puts out an annual report card that makes sure that they are doing business with small businesses. And we have two different developmental contracting programs. One is the 8A program, which is a 9-year developmental program that provides advantages to small businesses to compete for the federal contracts. The federal government spends over $500 billion a year in contracts, and we buy everything except illegal and sex, but everything else we buy. So, and what we do in those programs, in the first 4 years, we develop you and we work with you to take you through counseling, training, and development, and in giving you mentor-protege positions, people who have already graduated from our program who come in and work with you in joint ventures to compete against federal contracts. In that program, you can get up to $12 million competing only against people who have that certification, which means that's a closed, set-aside program for only those people in that developmental program. But also, you can get awarded a sole source contract of $3.5 million or less in federal government, and it puts you at an advantage. So the question he has to me, and getting to his point, is how does SBA protect small businesses against large businesses? And the way we do that is, one, through that goaling of 23% and making sure of that. And then the second thing we do is through our developmental programs that you heard. We also have the second hub zone, which is called the historically underutilized business zones. If you are in an area that is in a low income area or high unemployment area, and you move your headquarters in there and you hire 1/3 of your employees from a like-kind hub zone area, the government will give you a 10% preference on bidding, which means if you put out a bid and the lowest bid is $900,000 and you bid at $1 million, because of the 10%, you will automatically get the bid. And so these are mechanisms that the federal government used to protect small businesses and to make sure that you're there, because we know that it costs a little bit more for you as a small business because you're not as flexible and you don't have the resources that a large business have. So that is some of the ways we do. Now, when you are not in those programs, SBA also does another thing, which is advocacy. And we would look at, if that is a federal contract and you are a supply chain to that federal contract and you are small businesses and they are doing something that is manipulating the price or or your situation that they have contracted with you, then SBA will look into that and will freeze their contract until they get in line. And we have that authority.
Any more questions? I have one myself. Eugene, given all the incentives the SBA has to offer, both some of what you've said and some of what Mr. Katamaya said in the morning, what do you think is the biggest obstacle entrepreneurs, startups, small businesses have to accessing the resources you have to offer? And what do you think should be done to overcome those obstacles?
I think it goes back to what you heard Hazelwood say this morning. It comes back to the entrepreneur themselves not doing the research and finding out what's available to them. We as the government are not going to advertise our services. We can't. But you have to get down and dirty, as you heard him say, and do your tabletop data collection. You're going to have to go into it. If you notice, even today, as I was talking about SBA, I was throwing nuggets about there's 13 other agencies that does what we do. That was me saying, go research them, because I can't promote them because I don't work for them and I want you to come from me. But I don't want you not to know the information. And at the same time, you know, what you're seeing in the panel that was so well put together here is the diversity of who's on this table. And it's telling you that there's that SBA is not the only game in town, and that there are different ways in which you want to access capital, and this research is important. I think we, as a minority community, don't tend to look at the government as something that we could go to and get information, and we have to get over that. And the other thing I think has happened, and I think that SBA is very good at, is that we have not typically hired people who look like the communities we're trying to reach out to give that information to. You know, the fact that I am the Deputy of International Trade says something about SBA and its importance in diversity, and not only having diversity, but having diversity at different levels, to come out and talk to you directly and say things that you can culturally relate to. And I think those two things have been an obstacle to entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I want to add is this, and you know, the understanding the meaning of words also help people to know what it stands for. An entrepreneur is actually not a business owner. An entrepreneur is an organizer. The business is just a platform. The business is a tool, is the bridge between where you are and the problem you're trying to solve. So a lot of the time we focus on the business, forgetting that we need, one, to organize, to understand who the customer is, what their problems are. Number two, who the production experts are. Where is the market? How do I get the word out? How do I get the skilled labor? So you as an entrepreneur, you're actually an organizer. When you start working in the business, I'm telling you, you have just inverted the entire role. Because your job is not in the business. Your job is on the business, so that you can see the flow and the connectivity among the various roles and activities that the business requires. So until we understand that, you will just be running around in circles. And you know, it's very difficult most of the time, because we've spent most of our lives working in jobs, and then suddenly we are thinking that our being business owners is nobody's now my boss, I'm now my own boss. And then we forget that at that point in time, you have actually now taking on the responsibility of employing other people and ensuring that they get paid, and in them doing their jobs and getting paid, you get paid last, and you get paid the highest. So once we, like you said, going out to find the information for financing, information about customer acquisition, customer access, capital access, supply chain, and all those things, you've got to learn how to access, interpret, and then apply information to get results. Once you can understand that, I assure you, the result you get in your business will explode.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Any more? Going? Okay, some announcements before we adjourn. Please remember, tomorrow morning, the conference moves to 17 Hill House. This is 34 Hill House, so 17 Hill House. You walk past Trumbull. Trumbull is the road, right? You walk past Trumbull, you see a big, imposing White House. So that's the house, number 17. We'll be meeting in room 101. It's even a nicer room than this. So even if you're not coming for the content, come and see the room tomorrow. You'll like it. Also, Mr. Carlton Highsmith, whom some of you heard from today, will be making a presentation tomorrow also. We have a cast of very interesting, inspiring speakers also. Breakfast begins at, say, 8:15, 8:30, and then the main speaking session begins by 9 o'clock a.m. So I would like to invite you guys back, and if we haven't done that already, we'll need to have your email address and stuff so that we can be in touch with you. Where's John? Or you just leave us your business card, and then we'd like to keep in touch. For next year, we are planning even a bigger conference, so we will need you to be part of our growth and the growth of this conference. A time will come when, presidents and so on will be begging to come and speak at our conferences. So if you stick with us when that time comes, we will always let you in, no matter, yes. You've entered on the ground floor, if you like, and no matter how big we get, we'll always let you in. I want to appreciate our wonderful panelists. I want us to put our hands together for them. You can sense and hear the depth of, the depth they bring, the experience, the insights, the smartness. I was awed by, what I was hearing from our panelists. And I want to thank them very well. Mr. Cornelius, when you get back to DC, kind of press the administration to keep their eye on Africa, like you rightly said. Africa, and has been said here, is really the next big thing. And we need the U.S. administration to take Africa very seriously, and we'll appreciate that. We'll be in touch with you, and we thank you for honoring our invitation. Same with Seni, Eric, and Deborah. Thank you very much for coming and for making such wonderful presentations and contributions. Once again, let's put our hands together for them.
name is J. Stan McCauley, and I do business as Lightsource Productions. I provide professional services in the area of strategic video communications. First, what we do is we help you craft your message using what I call the rule of the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. We do event documentation, content acquisition, full-scale productions, editing, and of course distribution through our social media television network. And with social media, video is more important now than it has ever been. Whether you're talking big business, small business, nonprofit, church, or just an individual. Let's say you plan you're planning an event, a wedding, whatever the case may be, but let's say a big event, but no video. And you spent all this time, all these hours to put this event on, and maybe 100, 200 people attend the event. But more important than that is that thousands could attend by watching it on social media. But of course, you don't think about this until after the event is over. You can't afford not to capture it for social media. And despite what people think, I am affordable. Give me a call. Let's plan your next video project and share it with the world on my social media television network. I promise you that you will have the attention of one person, me.